Vlog number 21, October 27th, 1708, day 8. So, I think today is a good time to talk about hate. What is hate? Why do people hate so much? And what can be done to not hate other people and oneself so much anymore? Well, we should get into what hate is first. Hate is an extension of fear. It is essentially an aversion to circumstances that evoke a certain fear one may have. Now, there's a variety of fears out there, and there's also a variety of circumstances, so it's not so easy to blanket statement it. However, that is the general principle behind hate. It is a aversion up to extreme hostility against any kind of situation that evokes a fear within themselves. So, it has been seen lately that a lot of people have become more hateful. And what has also been seen is this lack of awareness of the fact that hate is simply an extension of fear. And therefore, by definition, people are actually becoming more fearful in reality. And apparently that hate is supposed to be in their minds, their shield to try, or their mask, to try to fool people into thinking that they're strong when in reality they're actually perhaps scared to death about certain things. And they don't want people to know they're scared to death about certain things. They would look bad. Oh no. There's a lot of things in this world right now that is making people very scared. And because of their upbringing and because of the way they were taught to think, aka lack of critical thinking and independent thought, they can only rely on what they were taught and the framework they were taught. And so because that framework oftentimes doesn't have the answers they seek, they instead become fearful and try to, say, export that fear through hatred or activities that may promote hatred as a way of making an outlet for their fear, which of course is not really that healthy. It's not really addressing the problem within, which is where it all begins, because as manifestation goes, whatever happens within you will be reflected on the outside. And so if people are stuck in hateful situations, it is because they are trying to push away the catalysts that may manifest the fears within themselves because they're too afraid of facing those fears in the first place. So it comes down to having the courage to do so and not worrying about what other people think of you when you do so. And there's a lot of fears out there. For instance, just to give an example, the fear of being looked down upon and having other people be more glorious than you are. Oh no, what are you going to do about it? Some people, especially some politicians, are more glorified than other politicians are. And there's some people who, with a complex of wanting to appear glorious to their peers, may develop a sense of jealousy and perhaps fear that they may not achieve such a level, and then they go and hate this person in retaliation. One example of this is, of course, Trump derangement syndrome, which is rooted in a fear like this. And that's according to my opinion, at least. Unfortunately, I had to deal with somebody lately that had this fear. It's not fun to deal with at all, especially since the way fear works is it tries to make sure that it cannot be found by one's awareness. And it tries to evade itself from your awareness as much as possible. So whether this means manipulating the conscious mind and the thoughts within it to make sure that the mind cannot see this fear, that's what it means. And it's one of the reasons why it often takes a long time before we realize what our own fears are. Whereas love is more of an attractor factor and is also kind of scary to deal with, but is a lot more beneficial. Fear, on the other hand, tries to evade awareness, and so it does take a bit of work to unearth it. And yeah, it's just a real shame to see people going around doing all these hateful activities and just essentially devolving and losing their conscience, as I mentioned in my last couple of videos, because fear basically just paralyzes the mind from higher thought. And instead of asking for higher guidance, they instead decide to follow the downward spiral into the animal realm, which has simple base primal fears, which they then live off of. Now, granted, there are some fears that are good. There are some fears that offer some protection. Of course, the fear of death is one of the most famous ones. It motivates people to learn how to protect themselves. Of course, that also goes way out of bounds oftentimes and just gets blown out of proportion. It's just a matter of knowing how reasonable a fear is versus not. But yeah, back to hatred. Hatred is just simply a mechanism that comes out of fear that tries to push away situations that would have the capability of evoking that fear. So if a marginalized group, for instance, for some reason has a fear of perhaps being deported or perhaps being destroyed or perhaps just being looked down on, perhaps being picked on, if they listen to that fear and if they decide that it is actually partially true at least, then this is where hatred develops. And this is regardless of that's the reality or not, because this decision comes from their perception of reality, and if their perception of reality is, if their perception says that's what it is, then that's basically what they do. And it doesn't matter if their perception is based on reality or not, which is a scary thing, because a lot of people, because of the way they live their lives, if they have a lot of fear and they can't face that fear because perhaps they don't have the courage to do so, they may surround themselves with deception, or they may lie to themselves to make sure they don't have to face that fear. And a part of this is, of course, being hateful. Because if somebody even tries to get into the root cause of those deceptions, then that's when the hate comes out as a way of trying to avert people from finding out the real meaning behind their lives. So that's one of the ways that hate is used. So if there is hate around, then fear is not far behind. And of course, the only way to really get through fear is to walk through it instead of averting it. So that comes from experience. Some people just do it right away. Some people just walk right through it. Some people, with some contemplation, can figure out that, okay, this fear is not actually real. It's just a delusion, and thus it dissipates. Of course, it depends on the fear and the person and the way they see life and their path, so I can't blanket statement that either. But yeah, the hate that's been going on everywhere, people are being consumed by it because they're being consumed by these fears, and it's making people go just absolutely insane lately. And they're just losing the ability to be aware of their own actions, really. Because once they get down to that primality, then their higher thought essentially paralyzes, and they just act by what their fear is essentially telling them. It's just sad to see how easily frightened people really are. And I know a lot of people don't want to hear that, but a lot of people are easily frightened at the end of the day. So perhaps there needs to be some kind of antidote where either people can have the ability to walk through that and see the illusions behind it, or perhaps get the courage to walk through it, or perhaps some kind of teachings that can show how the mechanisms of hate work and how the alternatives, which is loving kindness and essentially empathy, can take its place, essentially. But that does come with maturity, and that's also on not just the mind level, but it's also on the heart intelligence level. So, it's like the inner kingdom that we all have. It's much like the kingdom we build on the outside, except it's on the inside, and the building bricks are just like, virtues and discipline and all this other higher, all the higher laws that we follow. And our actions also keep the inner kingdom steady against the winds of change that may bring fear on the outside. But I'm digressing. So yeah, that's basically my rant on hatred. That's my 2 cents for the internet pool, I suppose you could say. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching, and have a good day.